Hey guys, welcome back. This is week 6, part 2 of the poster tutorial. Last week we did a photo bash, or we gathered our references and created our own reference for the poster using Photoshop. And this week there's 3 parts. The first part is modifying that sketch, that rough sketch that we created last week. And that includes things like drawing textures, and as I mentioned before, this is an indie film. It takes place during Christmas. So there are a few textures that are important to render for my poster, specifically the Christmas tree. So while I'm working on this, what I'm thinking about is how much details, or how big or small am I gonna make the strokes, because I don't want to make this so detailed if the other parts of the poster are more important. I want to keep this relatively simple. I mean, this is just to deliver the idea that it's Christmas. I want most of the attention and most of the more accurate rendering to happen on the faces. And on this, I just want to show the form. It's conical. And when I'm drawing these lines, they're just veer outwards. And I'm trying to think of it as a 3-dimensional thing, as opposed to just drawing random lines. It's kind of like a cake. There's multiple tiers or layers. And this video is sped up 4 times, so I kind of took my time. The drawing portion took about an hour and a half. Each part of it took an hour and a half. So I want the most basic things on the tree, ornaments, and there's a bow near the top. This is a good chance. What makes art unique is the decisions that we make. So during this stage, I usually am looking at my reference on my second monitor, but I'm not really copying it. I'm just trying to get a feel of what the texture is like. And the more decisions you make, the less it will look like you trace the photo, which is something you don't want. So this film is a story about a young guy who travels back in time. So there's a mix of technology and traditional things, but it's a drama, sci-fi drama, with a happy ending, or a hopeful ending at least. The boy is a smart kid because he knows how to build a time machine, and that's why I use these cogs and gears as the shape that everything is going to mask to. So this is one of the good ideas to use, is to use an iconic shape that tells the story and use it in a repetitive manner. There's multiple cogs that are stamped in there, and that is the space for the art. And then they have these spheres here. They're gonna turn into ornaments because he's a Christmas baby, Christmas, New Year baby. So these are themes that I want to show in the poster that will give the audience an idea of what the film is about and show some of the mood. So this couple here represent his parents from the past, who he'll go back and see and interact with. A great tactic for this is just finding as many photos as you can of the actors, and sometimes it's a matter of just snooping around the internet. A lot of actors will have their headshots, a lot of them have demo reels, and social media. I pulled you have to learn how to screen cap. For PC, it's just print screen that will copy the whatever's on your screen, and you go to Photoshop and just Control V or paste, and that's how I save my screen caps, especially from actors' demo reels. I learned that in production, people don't really have time to get back to you if you ask, say, the director, oh, this is like the exact angle of the actor that I need. Can I get a photo? Sometimes they can't get a hold of the actor or photographer, or they're gonna take a bad photo anyway, and it takes up their time. So the best way for me is just to dig the internet and take screen caps. And the more you do this, the more you'll see that if you just trace a photo straight out, kind of like how we did last week to come up with the rough, the stranger it looks. So we're always, while we're doing this drawing refinement, we always have to think about what we practice when we were drawing our studies of the head, thinking about the planes, thinking about how those grid lines would wrap around the three-dimensional form of the head. And for hair, the trick is, her hair is dark, so I'm gonna focus on the areas that are highlighted. And in this process of inking, I'm just going to get the darkest darks. I'm not gonna hatch too much because she's kind of a young character, a young parent. So I don't want to put too many wrinkles because that would make people look old really fast. And for hair, what you don't want to do is evenly space out every hair. You want to vary the spacing of the hair strands so that it looks natural. And again, I want to keep this poster overall pretty simple. I don't want to render it to death. I just want it to be still read as a piece of art. I'm not trying to paint it and make it look like a photo. Still want it to look like hand-drawn. So for guys, it's okay to use more hatching on the face to describe the planes of the face. This actor has a pretty square features. One of the things that I think about is line variation. So in order to decide where the lines will be thick, I have to make a call on where the light's coming from. Most of the time it's just coming from the top and a little bit to the right or left. So the thicker lines are going to be at the bottom of every form. Bottom of the arm, bottom of the chin, below the nose, below the lip. And I look for areas where there's an edge of where the light side ends and the shadow side begins. And if it's a soft edge, I'll put a few hatch marks to indicate that it's soft. And on the opposite side is a cast shadow, so I use a hard edge. It's a way to indicate soft and hard edges with ink. And again, I'm using Clip Studio Paint because of the built-in stabilizer. So I noticed that last week I didn't get all of the photo details that I need. This is a time machine, so it's simple, but the information is important. So in Clip Studio, there's these ruler tools, and one of them helps you draw curves. So those are good for drawing curves, like for the O or anything mechanical like that. I like to use the digital ruler. In Photoshop, I think it's the line tool, but again, for drawing, I always use Clip Studio because all the tools that I need are there, and the stabilizer is so important. Photoshop is great for painting, but for line art, Clip Studio is so much better. And to fill black areas, I just use the paint bucket tool. Quick way of filling blacks. So the alternative to this process is to get your sketch from last week, turn the whole sketch into blue line. So you take your sketch, turn all the black lines into blue, print it out on Bristol, and use traditional ink to do this step. That's a great way to create the handmade look and use traditional media. So I'm talking about a lot of different techniques, and years ago I had a buddy that was trying to teach me how to play drums, and he had this African drum called the djembe, and he said, when listen to this song, and he played the song on his djembe, and after he finished it, it was a few minutes, and he said, "Did you notice anything?" And I said, "Not anything particular. It sounded very good." And he said, did you notice that I was just playing 5 patterns and I was just repeating them in random orders? And I said, no, I totally didn't notice that. And I think making these art pieces is the same thing. If you use several techniques in one piece, it becomes like magic, and people don't know how you got there. The techniques become hidden, and that's when the magic happens. The wonder, like, oh, how did that happen? So the average eye or the average person are not trained to recognize what the techniques are, but the ones where we're using is photo bashing, we're using tracing, but we're also using hand-drawn art. It's almost like making imperfections on purpose. But the important thing is making decisions on where to put the marks. You know, where should we use curved lines? Where should we use straight lines? Where are the edges? Because in the photo reference, sometimes it's not very clear. And how do we simplify things? Because photos are so complex, we're obviously not going to go in and draw every leaf. So these are the decisions that make the art special or, you know, unique to you, because there's a reason why we make decisions, and if it makes sense, we will repeat that thinking process, and that will eventually define our style. It will be consistent. So sometimes I need to draw a straight line that goes across other elements, and it's not easy to just start one line and then try to continue it on the other side of like the window. So what I'll do is I'll just draw the line on a separate layer, and then I'll just erase out the parts that don't belong. That way it's not all on the same layer, and it just makes it easier to make the lines match. So in Clip Studio, all you have to do is press hold down Control and press B, and all the black parts on your layer will turn blue, and that's how you create the blue pencil. So if you want to print it out, your line art, you could do that, and then just ink with traditional ink. So on the left side there's a transition between the sky and the image on top. Right now I just have like a black arc to indicate that there needs to be transition there, but we're going to go back to that later on. And while you're doing these drawing parts, remember to flip your image horizontally, and don't be afraid. I mean, you don't have to spend forever rendering, but don't be afraid to erase some stuff and just fix it. Like the lines on his chin are very sloppy because last week we were just doing rough. So I'm gonna fix that, and I'm gonna modify the shape of his face. He has a very long face, and his eyes look a little different. So just gonna edit that a little bit because it looks weird when I flip it. The couple look good. in the flipped image, but yeah, the main actor needs a little modification. So there's two ideas in one for this poster actually. It's using a collage or a montage type of composition where it's different scenes collaged together, but we're also using the idea of the double exposure, using the iconic shape as the theme, the element that defines the theme. So I'm thinking about contrast and transitions here. I'm always zooming out to make sure that things look good from far away. Where the gears or where the cogs meet in the center, it gets a little confusing right now, but I think it's okay. The amount of detail on the couple looks great. I'm happy with that. And these ornaments need some decoration. So what you don't see is my second screen, and my second screen had to look up ornaments. Yeah. As simple as they are. So the main character is born on New Year, and part of the story takes place during a Christmas dinner at the house. The house is an important aspect, so it's like a character. And I think the contrast between big and small, organic and inorganic, is pretty interesting in this composition, because we have the house. It's very architectural, very inorganic, man-made, and then you have characters, and then one set is dominant, or you know, the boy is dominant, and then the parents are a little bit smaller, and I have the Christmas tree and then these ornaments. I think it's a good variety of elements. So now we're getting into toning. What I just did was I created a color hold layer, and I clipped it to the line art layer, and I filled it with brown. The idea is to soften the ink look, the black ink. So this brown is a little bit lighter, and there's a warmth to the outline. It softens the overall look. And I created a shape layer, filled it with like a medium gray. Now there are different ways of doing this. You don't have to do it this way, but I want to build up the techniques that we learn and chain them together. And this is a way that I learned from Marvel VizDev artists, and actually several artists do it this way, where they just do the tones first, and then they'll do a color pass later. So as I'm going here, I don't have it all figured out from the start, and these ornaments look weird just floating there. I think I'm gonna draw little lines that will come down and be like a vertical element to show that they're just hanging by a string later on, and then the string, some of it can be like in front of this flat picture plane, and then some of it can go behind the cogs. It's an idea. I think it'll make it look a little bit more interesting, show a little bit more depth. So in my reference, this photo or screen cap is super blurry. Sorry about the plane. And I don't mind my reference being blurry because it gives me an opportunity to make some decisions on where the edges are. It allows me to do some drawing. And whenever I get a chance to do that, it makes the piece unique and hand-drawn, which is what I want this piece to look like. So the decisions that I have to make, since the reference photo is so blurry, is where the edges are. Because everything in the reference is soft, I have to decide how I'm going to simplify the lighting. Where are the highlights? And where does the light side turn to the dark side? And how much contrast do I really want? So the film has a hopeful ending, and my reference is really high contrast. So my decision is to make the piece lower in contrast. So again, every now and then I zoom out to make sure that everything looks normal from far away. It's really important to check. So a good trick for doing gradations is just to select the flat shape and use a soft brush, like the for behind the Christmas tree. So for this pair, the light's gonna be on top, but her complexion should be a little darker than his. It's very subtle, but I choose a slightly lighter gray for his skin. Hopefully you can see that. I also like to jump around on the canvas sometimes to not work in one area too long. It's just an effort to kind of bring everything up to the same level quicker. And then if I have time, I'll render each area some more to bring the overall piece up. Since this is a realistic style poster, I'm not exaggerating the house or distorting it in any strange way to make it surreal or anything, which means that it's a lot more likely to look like it's traced from a photo. And there's a tendency, I think, when people do it is to draw way too much details because they don't know which part to choose when they're looking at the details. So when I'm working on stuff like this, like the house or anything technical in a realistic style, I try to think about how to simplify it. There's a balance between the simplification and the detail. And foreground, background. I put a shrub in the foreground here. So a lot of this is interpretation. How much contrast? And how do I edit the values to make it work for my purpose? And how much detail do I need? Where's the focal point? There's the focal point for the whole poster, but there's also a focal point for each area of the poster. With my experience for rendering, I noticed that the least amount of values that are needed to show form is 3. If you have 3 different values in one area, the object looks dimensional almost automatically. And always be aware and try to be consistent to where the light direction is coming from. So render everything according to the same light source in the same scene. So the right side of the house is getting a little bit bounce light on top. That's why I used the gradient. It's very subtle in the reference, but I think it adds a dimension when I use it here. Things in the foreground will tend to have more contrast than things in the background. So the house behind this one, I purposely select values that give it less contrast. And there's a really cool shadow or a light pattern that goes across the house. I want to capture that. So what I did was put a layer on top, change it to screen layer mode, and just drew a white stripe across. And then soften the edges because there's something in front of this and it's not near, it's a little bit further away, so it's a softer edge. And then the bottom is a driveway. So as I'm choosing values, I'm thinking you know, the top should be lighter, the bottom should be darker, and then everything that's in the crevice gets less light, so those areas should be darker too. I'm looking at the big picture. Their overall tonal composition is pretty interesting the way it is right now. It's darker on top, and my explanation is the story starts dramatic on top. The problem or the obstacle presents itself right away. It's a short film. They don't have a lot of screen time, so immediately there's conflict, which makes the main character want to travel back in time. And the way we read is from top to bottom, left to right. So it starts with the boy, and in the middle, right below him, is his time machine. And then if you go to the right, the time machine takes him to his parents. And at the very bottom, the resolution happens. I mean, the whole story, everything happens at the house. So the house is the last character, and then the rest of it is just ornamental to show the theme, the gift boxes. And the film has a hopeful ending, so I made it tonally softer and lighter at the bottom and more contrasty and dramatic on top. So like I said, these are the decisions, artistic decisions that we make to reason our way through choosing whether or not or how we edit our reference to make it appropriate for the story that it's for or the project that it's for. The size of this poster is 11 by 17, so the resolution I have it set to is just 11 by 17 at 300 dots per inch. Trying to not draw too much details on these small heads because I want the level of detail to be consistent across the whole poster. So while I'm drawing tone, sometimes I go back and I fix my line drawing a little bit, or I actually use the tones to make strokes that look like drawing strokes. If you look at his face, you'll see 3 values. There's a light, medium, and dark. So there's my example of needing 3 values to show depth. If you do too little, it just looks a little lazy or a little lacking. So when you do your piece, try to have at least 3 values. I like to keep everything hard-edged because, again, that's another area where I can make a decision, and it's done on purpose. I like it. I think every great piece of art that I like is very decisive, so I want to steer my art in that direction. If I have to design the shape of the light, That's kind of the fun part of it. And you don't have to go overboard. I'm just thinking about the overall contrast. Pretty close to done on this toning stage. I want to put a little bit of details, but not too much. I don't want her hair to look way better than the main character's collar, which is a little rough right now. That's what I mean by consistency. And I don't like the dark outline of the cogs, so eventually I'm gonna erase some of it out. So again, when rendering, I'm thinking about where the edges are. It's gonna be soft, closer to the light, or where the light areas turn to the dark, and then on the opposite side is cast shadow, and you're gonna get a hard edge. A week ago, I got asked by an agency for poster samples, but they wanted layouts. So that's why recently you've seen me posting a lot of poster samples, but they're just sketches for layouts, because modern posters are all photographic. So they really just need the artist to do a sketch so that they can figure out the design, the layout. And we're kind of making a roadmap so that the photographer can get the actors or talent and just photograph them, and in the end somebody just edits the photos, put them together. So the only drawing part is the beginning layout stage. Rarely do we get to do finish, polish illustrations for a lot of the official movie posters. But that's why it's fun to work on some of these indie projects. There's a bunch of these projects happening on Kickstarter and GoFundMe, and it's a good way to find the right crowd who's also coming up and need a little help. They might be a little more low budget, but you usually get to do whatever you want. And that freedom is kind of cool. You have the freedom to keep it looser. Okay, so I added some highlights to the curves on the ornaments. And I purposely space the ornaments out more randomly. So I'm thinking, is the light side of Daniel's face, the main character, needs to be a little brighter. It was too low in contrast. The great thing about using hard edges is that it's easy to select the shape that you put down and then just paint bucket the new value on top. If you want to be lighter, you just go to your color wheel, color palette, and select the lighter value and just fill it. When you use soft edges on your rendering, it's harder to select and do edits. And in the end, when you're satisfied with everything, then you could always soften an edge, like I will on the left side. So time machine has the dates, day, year, and month. These are all lights, so I'm going to make them lighter, but there are technical tiny little details that I don't want to be way too bright. Just enough to stand out. Another decision that I made is to keep everything very crisp. I'm not gonna do any photographic lens blur or blurring the background or foreground, things like that. I'm just gonna keep it like this is a hand-drawn piece of art and not trying to make it look like a photo. So I'm not gonna soften any edges that I don't need to. It's just gonna be more stylistic. So I found a snowflake wallpaper on Google. I just pasted it in behind the Christmas tree because it looked a little too plain over there. For the house, I just pasted the photo of the clouds. Now I'm adding these strings like I said I would. Another vertical element that kind of ties everything together and gives it a little depth. Like I said, some will go behind and some will go in front. There's some dark areas, so I'm gonna make two of the strings a light gray so that we can see the string. And like I said before, when I need to draw long lines like this, I do it on a separate layer, delete or mask out the parts that I want hidden. This is a very important part actually of the overall process because values are more important than color. And since this is Christmas theme, I kind of want to go with like a red and green type palette, but sometimes that's a little too dramatic and too Christmassy. So I'm gonna choose colors that are near those colors. I'm gonna go with orange and slightly towards orange and slightly towards teal. Although the yellow and purple actually looks kind of decent, but it's a little feels a little too dramatic for this. I think it's better with the orange and teal. So here I'm erasing some of the outlines of the cogs. I want to make it a little bit less graphic, like everything has an outline. So soften all the edges. So the outline of, yeah, I'm only erasing the outline. And I'm not going to be the one doing the typography. The fixed title there is just a placeholder. One of the tricks to this is to blend techniques together, like that djembe drum song that my friend played for me. If we can blend techniques together and hide where one technique goes into another, we'll be able to create this magical handmade piece that people go, oh, how did you do that? So this is what the art looks like when I turn the line art layer off. I just need to do some cleaning up of the edges. So the other problem that I need to solve is how to blend the art with the cloud photo texture. And the solution is, I think, just to paint it in, hand paint some of it in. There's like a weird light post in the reference. And I'm gonna paint that out. I have the area of the sky selected, so I'm not painting outside of that area. And I'm just gonna hide the light post and try to blend like a painting stroke with the photo. Try to create like a happy medium between hand illustration and a photo-like background. I'm gonna make it look like I tried. Again, I'm zooming out to take a look at it and see if the contrast looks okay. And you can I'm using a level adjustment layer to modify contrast to see what looks good. The idea is higher contrast on top, darker on top, lower contrast on the bottom, and softer tonal range on the bottom. It looks pretty good at this point. So now I'm going to color, and what I did is create a layer, set it to color layer blending mode. This is the same way, this works the same way in Photoshop. What it does is you select the color, and it will paint that color as you put it on the canvas without changing the value of the tones underneath. And I'm just gonna mask out the shape, so I'm not painting into the white areas, or I am painting into it, but the mask is keeping it off. Like I said, we're gonna build up techniques, and since this week we're finishing the poster, I'm gonna keep coloring super simple. This is a way of going from tones to color. When I have stuff like this where I have to fill in skin areas, I'll just get a big brush and just fill the whole thing, and then go back and paint the white of the eyes out. It's just faster than trying to draw around the little eye as I go in the first pass. So when I'm choosing colors, I pay attention to the saturation. What I want to do is keep the saturation level kind of low, and then I can always boost it up at the end using a layer adjustment layer. Yeah. Sometimes this stage looks a little strange because of the way that the color layer mode works. But mostly I'm just looking at like an overall limited palette that is somewhat cohesive. It doesn't have to be perfect. I can always unify it later, like I said, with color balance or I'm just using a hard edge round brush to fill in colors. I want different color ornaments, but not too different and not too vibrant. Like that green in front of his face is way too green. So I'm looking at harmony, color harmony. Almost looks like I'm painting with muddy colors, which it is. That's exactly it. I want to repeat some colors, so I'm not just gonna paint with every color in the rainbow, even though these are presents and ornaments and Christmassy. So the idea is if you choose a main color like orange and teal, the idea is to keep the other colors a lot more neutral, but I just want to experiment with this and see what would happen if I gave her like a greenish jacket. I'll probably modify it a little bit later, but like I said, this is a stage where I'm experimenting with local color. Local color is a color of an object on a cloudy day or with ambient lighting. And since we have established our values, I don't have to think about values, which is great. That's the best part about working in this way, is to hammer the values down. Normally I would, if I didn't do it this way and just went in with straight color, I would have a layer on top set to color filled with black, which I turn on and off every now and then to check the values as I paint. But I'm not doing it in this process because I already did the values, so I don't need to check it so often. And like I said, I don't have it all planned out from the beginning, so I'm just putting in quick color and then I'll make a decision to which way to turn it to. Local color, I guess blue makes sense for the sky, and like warm highlights where the sun hits it. Sometimes it's good to jump around the canvas just so you cover the area quicker. You're less likely to noodle around in one area too long. And it just lets your eyes kind of harmonize the overall piece. It gives your eyes more opportunity to do that. So now the green is looking kind of strange. I'm going to modify that. And again, I'm not copying my reference. At this point, I'm not even looking at my reference anymore. I don't know what I mean, other than the color of the main house, I don't remember what the color of the background house is, and it's not important anymore. So I'm just gonna keep the colors super simple. I'm adding a saturation adjustment layer because I don't want it to look too drabby. I want people to see the poster from far away and go, oh, this looks like an interesting movie. So up to saturation. Remember to save it. And there's some stuff in Photoshop that you just can't do in Clip Studio. like the camera raw filter. So I like to save my image and bring it into Photoshop near the end and play with stuff like gradient maps or selective color in the adjustment layer. So this is color lookup. You can, it emulates different film stock and different, oh, that blue one looks cool. But it emulates different color that you might not have thought of. And you get a different look, a different perspective of your art. And this helps harmonize the colors also, because it kind of tints your art. And sometimes it's really hard to choose one. But if you keep the your colors kind of neutral in the beginning, this stage will help you brighten it up or add saturation back in. So a good trick is adding a color dodge layer on top to introduce like a light source to highlight certain areas. So that this is a color dodge layer. I tried using a blue or a cool light to lighten some areas. I usually use blue or orange, but in this case blue looks good. And you can play with the other layer modes too. There's a whole bunch of them, like vivid light, soft light, overlay. It's not a bad idea to just kind of scroll through them and see what looks better. It's all a matter of taste. So again, save it. I'm gonna pull a texture to put like a global texture to it. It just adds a little texture so that everything doesn't look so flat. I'm going to use overlay. And I'm gonna apply one copy of this to the art part, and I'm gonna duplicate the texture and apply one copy to the background so that it'll look like it's on this old paper with a little texture on it. So this stage I like to zoom out a lot, and then for the very final step there's a filter called camera raw filter. Hopefully you have it in your version of Photoshop, but it lets you adjust everything like a raw image, like curves. You can make highlights lighter or darker, increase contrast, saturation. You can saturate only the dark areas. You can select, actually I really like this, the toning part, because you can make the highlights cool or the shadows warm, and it's a great filter to kind of harmonize every color. If you have any strange color that stands out too much, this kind of ties them all together. But it's just sliders. You just pull them left and right, decide what you think looks better, and keep it. Or keep it for a while and see if you change your mind later on. And that's it. Thanks for watching.